Good evening. My name is Perry Franklin, and I will serve as your facilitator for the Midbarataria Sediment Diversion public meeting. Tonight, we will be talking about the Draft Environmental Impact Statement, or more commonly known as the EIS, and Draft Natural Damage Assessment Restoration Plan, or RP, for the proposed Midbarataria Sediment Diversion project. Please keep in mind that both of these documents are still in draft form. And tonight, we are requesting your feedback before making our final decision. Thank you for your interest in the proposed project and attending tonight's virtual meeting. Whether you are listening in via telephone or on your computer's audio, please note that we all have your audio muted at this time. If you are experiencing technical difficulties and would like to request assistance, please use the questions box located on the right-hand side of the webinar interface, and we will try to reach out and help you. We have a court reporter with us tonight who will transcribe the entire meeting, including your public comments. We're also joined by several language translators who will be introduced shortly. The recording of tonight's webinar will be posted on the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers webpage, along with the written transcript of the meeting in the near future. We will share the link with you via the chat box. The PowerPoint presentation and the transcript will also be posted on the Deepwater Horizon Trustee Council's website. When you registered for tonight's webinar, you were asked if you would like to make a verbal comment. We have received a number of requests, and we have responded to each person via email with instructions on how to make verbal comments to our listening panel. After the presentation portion of tonight's webinar, we will take your important public comments. If you didn't make a request to provide a public comment before this meeting, that's okay, as it is not too late to sign up, and we will give you those instructions shortly. One last note. If you are joining us only via phone and are not connected to the webinar system, you will not be able to make comment during this meeting. If you are calling in over the phone and you're not connected to a computer and would like to make a verbal comment, please call 866-211-9205. Let me give you that number again. It's 866-211-9205 at any time before May 4th. We will review all methods for submitting public comments towards the end of tonight's webinar. Now I'd like to introduce you to the folks that you will be hearing from tonight, either live or via a video recording. In addition to myself, you will hear from Brad Laborde with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Brad Bart with the Louisiana Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority, or more commonly known as CPRA, as well as Mel Landry, who represents the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA. We also have several language translators with us tonight, and they will translate any public comments that are received in Spanish, Vietnamese, or Khmer. As a reminder, this webinar will be recorded. We thank you in advance for using respectful language during your public comment and for adhering to the 3-minute rule per comment. All comments will be made available to the public and gathered as a part of the public record. The public comment period, again, is open until May 4th. We are accepting public comments in a number of ways, including written comment by U.S. mail, electronic comments via our web-based system, voicemail on a toll-free line, and tonight during our public comment portion of the webinar. And of course, the public comment portion of tonight's webinar will follow the PowerPoint presentation that we'll go into shortly. Please note that you only need to submit your comment via one of these ways for it to become a part of the official public record. Tonight's webinar will start with approximately a 35-minute video presentation, which covers details of the proposed project. Then we will move into the public comment portion of tonight's webinar. The webinar will run for a total of 3 hours. The video that will be shown shortly is in English. But if you would like to listen to the video in Spanish, Vietnamese, or Khmer, we have audio recordings available at toll-free numbers that will be listed on the following slides. Now, we will hear from each of the translators we have with us tonight. First will be Spanish, then Vietnamese, and then Khmer. Ms. Soto, the floor is yours.
Thank you. El seminario web de hoy comenzará con aproximadamente 35 minutos de presentaciones de video que cubrirán detalles del proyecto propuesto. El video se muestra en inglés aquí, pero si llama al 855-786-7103, otra vez 855-786-7103, escuchará la presentación en español. Luego del video pasaremos a la sección de comentarios del público acerca del seminario web. El seminario web de hoy será en inglés, sin embargo, estaré en el seminario web para traducir sus comentarios si es que deseara hacerlo en español. El seminario web durará un total de 3 horas. Gracias.
Mr. Nguyen.
Thank you. Hội thảo trên web của ngày hôm nay sẽ bắt đầu với khoảng 35 phút trình chiếu video bao gồm các chi tiết của dự án được đề xuất. Video được hiển thị ở đây bằng tiếng Anh, nhưng nếu bạn gọi 855-786-7103, bạn sẽ nghe thấy bằng thuyết trình bằng tiếng Việt. Sau video, chúng tôi sẽ chuyển sang phần bình luận công khai của hội thảo trên web. Hội thảo trên web hôm nay sẽ bằng tiếng Anh. Tuy nhiên, tôi sẽ tham gia hội thảo trên web để nhìn nhận xét của bạn nếu bạn muốn đưa ra bằng tiếng Việt. Hội thảo trên web sẽ diễn ra trong tổng cộng 3 giờ. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen. Mr. Tay.
Thank you. ជំរាបសួរ សិក្ខាសាលាតាមអ៊ីនធឺណិតនៅថ្ងៃនេះនឹងចាប់ផ្ដើមឡើងដោយបង្ហាញជាវីដេអូប្រហែលជា35នាទីដែលរៀបរាប់លម្អិតអំពីគម្រោងដែលស្នើធ្វើឡើងវីដេអូដែលបង្ហាញនេះនឹងធ្វើតាមជាភាសាអង់គ្លេសប៉ុន្តែបើសិនជាអ្នកហៅទូរស័ព្ទទៅលេខ 866-2-8705 អ្នកនឹងបានស្ដាប់ឮជាភាសាខ្មែរបន្ទាប់ពីវីដេអូយើងនឹងបន្តទៅផ្នែកមតិសាធារណៈនៃសិក្ខាសាលាតាមអ៊ីនធឺណិតនេះសិក្ខាសាលាតាមអ៊ីនធឺណិតនៅថ្ងៃនេះនឹងធ្វើតាមជាភាសាអង់គ្លេសប៉ុន្តែខ្ញុំនឹងចូលរួមសិក្ខាសាលាតាមអ៊ីនធឺណិតនេះដើម្បីបកប្រែមតិរបស់អ្នកប្រសិនជាបើអ្នកចង់ផ្ដល់មតិជាភាសាខ្មែរសិក្ខាសាលាតាមអ៊ីនធឺណិតថ្ងៃនេះនឹងប្រព្រឹត្តទៅនៅក្នុងរយៈពេលសរុប3ម៉ោងសូមអរគុណ Thank you.
Thank you to our translators who are with us tonight. At this time, we will transition to the video presentations.
Hello, and welcome to the public meeting presentation for the proposed Midbarataria Sediment Diversion project. My name is Brad Laborde. I'm the regulatory project manager for the proposed Midbarataria Sediment Diversion project and part of the Corps of Engineers review team in charge of developing this environmental impact statement, or EIS, here at the New Orleans district. This pre-recorded presentation is available to you on the Corps of Engineers Midbarataria project webpage. Myself and the Corps review team thank you for sacrificing your time to actively participate and provide your feedback on this draft EIS. Ideally, we would host these public meetings in person, but due to the ongoing public health crisis, we cannot at this time. Again, we thank you for your participation under these circumstances. There are 3 presentations available to you. Each will cover a different aspect of the proposed Midbarataria Sediment Diversion project review. The core presentation will identify engaged parties and outline our roles in this review, provide an update since the scoping period, show you how and where to submit your comments, and then I'll walk you through the draft EIS to help with your review. Brad Barth from the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority, or CPRA, will present project-specific information about the proposed Midbarataria Sediment Diversion project. Mel Landry from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, has a presentation covering another key document the EIS will inform, the Draft Phase 2 Restoration Plan. NOAA is presenting on behalf of the Louisiana Trustee Implementation Group, or TIG. During our live virtual meetings, the pre-recorded presentations will run in the order shown here. It is important for you to understand the roles each of us play in this process. First is the public. Your feedback is valuable to us. In 2017, we held scoping meetings and asked, what would you like to see analyzed? Now we are coming to you once again with a draft EIS to ask, how do we do, so that we can consider your comments for the final EIS. The Corps is the lead federal agency in preparing the EIS. Due to the complexity of the proposed Midbarataria Sediment Diversion project review, the Corps has an independent third-party contractor with a team of subject matter experts to help analyze information and prepare the EIS. The Corps' role is strictly in a regulatory capacity. We are neither an opponent nor a proponent of the proposed Midbarataria Sediment Diversion project. We are tasked with making sure the EIS is based on the best available science, engineering, and professional judgment. Publishing the draft EIS is another milestone in our ongoing review. The Corps' decision to deny, approve, or proffer a least damaging alternative will not be made until after the final EIS. In addition to our independent third-party contractor, the Corps has assistance from cooperating agencies who also have teams of experts to assist with analyzing information and drafting the EIS. Many cooperating agencies also use the EIS to inform their laws and regulations. CPRA is a proponent of the proposed Midbarataria Sediment Diversion project. The project is part of their larger coastal master plan. CPRA is proposing to construct, operate, and maintain this project. The TIG is made up of a number of federal and state agencies, which includes some cooperating agencies and CPRA that will be using the EIS as a tool to help determine whether or not to fund CPRA's proposed project. The Corps is not a TIG agency, but we work closely with the TIG and other cooperating agencies to agree to the EIS schedule and processes leading up to the publication of the draft EIS. This shows some of our key milestones, starting with the public scoping process in July 2017. During the scoping period, you gave us great feedback, submitting over 870 comments. We took your comments and asked CPRA to respond to them, which required them to use a number of scientific models and draft a series of technical reports. CPRA's modeling information and technical reports were reviewed by the Corps and our independent third-party contractor, the TIG, and our other cooperating agencies. The Corps' independent third-party contractor then drafted the EIS chapter by chapter, based in part by CPRA's modeling and technical reports, the TIG and cooperating agency comments, and other best available science. The comment period from March 5th to May 4th, 2021 is your opportunity to submit your feedback and answer the question of how did we do? Your feedback will again be considered for the final EIS. Once complete, the final EIS will have another comment period and lead to the Corps record of decision or permit decision scheduled for spring of next year. Since I've mentioned it a few times now, let's walk through the Corps Midbarataria project webpage. On the right in purple, you will find materials related to our live virtual meetings under the Draft EIS Meeting Materials title. All Corps Draft EIS public notices and links for the presentations can be found here. After our live virtual meetings, the recordings will be placed under the DEIS Meeting Recordings title. And under the Previous Meetings title, the 2017 Scoping Meeting presentation is available in case you need a refresher about the Corps' regulatory involvement or a better understanding of the EIS process. On the right in green, we have information about ways to submit your written and oral comments. I will show you the comment portal on the next slide. Below that in gold, you will see EIS documents. It is where the entire draft EIS and 2017 scoping report are stored. If you click Draft EIS, a box will open as shown in the callout. Place your cursor over the chapter you wish to review and click. Shortly after, a PDF version of that chapter will open. At the bottom here, I provided the link, but if you Google Core Midbarataria, the top result should be this page. The second result should be another link shown here for the permitting dashboard. This example is for another project, but it gives you an idea of what to expect when you access the comment portal. It will have a project page first. If you click the Comment Now box, it will direct you to another page where you can enter your name, location, and comment in the available fields as shown here. Please notice that the comment portal is located on a National Park Service website. We are using this site because it helps us manage and sort the comments you submit for the draft EIS and restoration plan. The Corps and the TIG have full access to the material submitted here in real time, so you should have no concerns using this for your commenting. Now that I've discussed the engaged parties, updated you on our milestones, and showed you how to navigate the Core Midbarataria project webpage, I'll turn it over to Brad Barth and Mel Landry for their presentations.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Brad Barth, the Mid-Basin Sediment Diversion Program Manager with the Louisiana Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority. Today, I'll be sharing some information specific to the Midbarataria Sediment Diversion Project. As I mentioned, I'm with CPRA, the state of Louisiana's single state agency responsible for spearheading all effort related to coastal protection and restoration. This includes developing Louisiana's Coastal Master Plan, which is a tool that helps the state prioritize funding and the implementation of coastal restoration projects across our coast. Sediment diversions are the cornerstone projects of the master plan, designed to reconnect the Mississippi River to our starved basins and reestablish the natural land building processes that originally built our delta. There are numerous factors that have contributed to Louisiana's land loss crisis. As some of you know, our state has lost over 2,000 square miles of land since the 1930s. Barataria Basin, the proposed project location, has actually experienced some of the highest rates of land loss in the world. There are several causes for our land loss, including sea level rise and subsidence, where the water level in the Gulf continues to rise as our land continues to sink, as well as other effects of climate change. Barataria Basin is also home to some of the wetlands that were most heavily oiled during the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. The extensive oiling and subsequent response activities significantly accelerated land loss in this area. Other man-made contributions, like privately owned projects and oil and gas canals, have caused land loss. And probably most importantly, our current levee system, which protects our communities, has cut off the Mississippi River from depositing sediment, nutrients, and fresh water into our basins. This natural land building process, where the Mississippi River deposits sediment, sands, silts, and clays to strengthen and nourish our marshes, is how coastal Louisiana was built in the first place. As you can see here, when we built our current levee system, the red lines on the map on the right, we restricted the river from strengthening and building our marshes. A sediment diversion is designed to reconnect the river and reestablish the natural flow of sediment and nutrients out into our basins. Sediment diversions, including the Midbarataria Sediment Diversion, are projects the state of Louisiana has been planning and working on for decades. Plans to reconnect the river are not new, but planning for the Midbarataria Sediment Diversion picked up momentum in the 1980s with both state and federal agencies. By the late 2000s, significant sediment and river data collection efforts in support of sediment diversions began. This data collection continues to this day. In 2011, the Midbarataria Sediment Diversion was proposed at River Mile 61 to optimize the power of the river and the land building potential. In 2012, the Coastal Master Plan recommended the project as a priority. As such, CPRA embarked on the engineering, design, and permitting of the project. The 2017 Coastal Master Plan again recommended the project as a cornerstone project. Cornerstone projects are Louisiana's best tools to build and sustain land. The proposed project location is in Plaquemines Parish on the west bank of the Mississippi River at River Mile 61 near the town of Ironton. And here you'll see a visual rendering of what the project might look like once constructed. The Mississippi River is at the bottom of your screen, flowing from right to left, and the basin is located at the top of the screen. Features include an inlet basin in the Mississippi River, a gate complex consisting of a U-frame and a gate structure, a guide levee and channel system, and an outlet basin. During high river, sediment enters the inlet basin, flows through the gate complex, guide levees and channel, and through the outlet basin where the sediment is then slowed to begin deposition and formation of new land. The gate complex allows for control and closure of the diversion during critical times, such as a tropical storm or hurricane events. As such, the gate complex is integrated with our current levee systems. Other features include bridges for Louisiana Highway 23 and the New Orleans Gulf Coast Railroad. So, moving forward, it's important to understand all the coordinating agencies and entities involved in this process. CPRA is the agency in Louisiana responsible for planning, engineering, and design of the project. We work in close coordination with the lead federal agency, the United States Army Corps of Engineers, to provide them information as needed, where CPRA is the applicant for the Joint Section 10404 permit application. I will now turn it over to Mel Landry with the Louisiana Trustee Implementation Group, or Louisiana TIG, who will explain the Louisiana TIG's role in this process.
Hi, I'm Mel Landry, and I'm with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, commonly referred to as NOAA. In this presentation, I'll introduce you to the Louisiana Trustee Implementation Group and our role in the Midbarataria Sediment Diversion. The Louisiana Trustee Implementation Group, or LATIG, is the group of coordinating federal and state agencies responsible for overseeing the use of the Deepwater Horizon natural resource damages settlement dollars allocated to Louisiana. The Louisiana TIG drafted the restoration plan, which is the document that details the evaluation and recommendation of the LATIG to fund the construction of the Midbarataria Sediment Diversion to restore resources injured by the Deepwater Horizon spill. The Deepwater Horizon spill began nearly 11 years ago on April 20th, 2010, when the Deepwater Horizon drilling rig exploded off the coast of Louisiana and sank to the floor a mile deep in the Gulf of Mexico, 50 miles off the coast of Louisiana. 11 workers on the rig lost their lives, and oil flowed from the seafloor for 87 days. The Barataria Basin was the epicenter of oiled wetlands. Oil worsened existing erosion, and efforts to clean up the oil resulted in additional wetland damage. The agencies that are now members of the Louisiana TIG, as well as other agencies in states across the Gulf, immediately the injuries caused by the spill. Even before the full extent of the damage was known, the agencies began work to restore the ecosystem through $1 billion in early restoration funds provided by BP. 5 years ago, in 2016, the agencies reached a settlement with BP and the responsible parties that provided up to $8.8 billion in funding to restore the natural resources damaged across the Gulf of Mexico by the spill. Over half of that funding, $5 billion, is allocated to the Louisiana restoration area and is managed by the Louisiana TIG. Of that $5 billion, over $4 billion are allocated to restoring and conserving habitat in Louisiana. This large investment in habitat in Louisiana is in recognition not only of the large impact in the state, but also the benefit that the restoration of that habitat can provide to the Gulf of Mexico ecosystem. Our work on Deepwater Horizon restoration is guided by the Programmatic Damage Assessment and Restoration Plan, which we refer to as the PDARP. The PDARP was part of the settlement and is the overarching restoration plan that guides the development of all other subsequent restoration plans. The PDARP does not state exactly what projects should occur where, but it does guide us in the selection of the types of projects that we might plan throughout the entire Gulf of Mexico region. The PDARP recognizes the potential value of large-scale sediment diversions in restoring the resources injured by the spill. Building on the framework provided by the PDARP, in 2018, the Louisiana TIG finalized a Barataria Basin Strategic Restoration Plan that identified a combination of restoration approaches that would support restoration of the injuries in the Barataria Basin. That plan identified 3 projects for further development and evaluation: large-scale Barataria marsh creation, Spanish Pass Ridge and marsh restoration, and the Midbarataria Sediment Diversion. Large-scale Barataria marsh creation and Spanish Pass Ridge and marsh restoration each underwent design and evaluation in subsequent Phase 2 restoration plans and have been funded for construction. Today, we're here to present to you and hear your input on the Phase 2 Restoration Plan 3.2 for the Midbarataria Sediment Diversion. The objectives of the Midbarataria Sediment Diversion are to restore injuries from the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, to deliver fresh water, sediment, and nutrients to the Barataria Basin through a large-scale sediment diversion, to reconnect and reestablish sustainable deltaic processes between the Mississippi River and the Barataria Basin, and to create, restore, and sustain wetlands and other deltaic habitats. By redirecting freshwater, sediment, and nutrients from the Mississippi into the Barataria Basin, the diversion is projected to create or sustain over 17,000 acres of marsh at its peak. Based on the sea level rise scenario used in our evaluation, the total acreage created or sustained is reduced by year 50, but is still substantial. Critically, at that point, the marshes created or sustained by the diversion represent 20% of all the marsh that is projected to remain in the Barataria Basin. The wetlands created and sustained by the diversion will restore injuries caused by the Deepwater Horizon spill by creating habitat and supporting the many resources that rely on that habitat. Some of the key benefits of the diversion are comprehensive and sustainable regional ecosystem restoration. The diversion is designed to maintain created wetlands over a long period of time without additional construction. The diversion creates and protects coastal marshes that provide habitat and reduce storm surge during large storms. The diversion is anticipated to improve the effectiveness and longevity of other marsh restoration projects, including the nearby projects that work to restore the Barataria land bridge. The diversion will provide aquatic and terrestrial species benefits, including largemouth bass, red drum, Gulf menhaden, bay anchovy, white shrimp, and blue crab. It also provide recreational use benefits, such as duck hunting, bird watching, and fishing. A key to the success of the project is being able to monitor and adapt the project based on what we learn. There is no other project like this in the world, so our analysis of the project's potential effect is based on extensive computer and large-scale physical modeling that help us understand how the river, the diversion, and the basin work. Once the diversion is operating, we can also use data from the field to maximize project benefits and reduce adverse effects while still maintaining the project's objectives. Restoring a deltaic process that has been absent at this scale in the Barataria Basin for approximately 100 years is expected to result in significant changes to the ecosystem. In addition to the benefits I've discussed, some resources will experience collateral injuries caused by the diversion. In recognition of these, the Louisiana TIG is proposing a suite of stewardship measures to help address the effects on resources and communities. One of the most visible and most impacted resources will be bottlenose dolphins. Approximately 2,000 dolphins live in the Barataria Basin. These dolphins are expected to remain in the basin as salinities decrease with diversion operation. Exposure to low salinity water and other stressors is expected to reduce the annual survival rate for dolphins across most of the basin. The Louisiana TIG and CPRA have developed a suite of measures in anticipation of impacts to dolphins and to meet the requirements of legislation that directed NOAA to issue a waiver under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. The effects on dolphins will be monitored beginning with baseline data collection before operations. To help support dolphin stocks across the state, the Louisiana TIG will fund efforts to reduce stressors, as well as continued funding of the statewide marine mammal stranding network. With data from operations, CPRA will evaluate the potential to modify operations to reduce impacts to dolphins while meeting project objectives. Lastly, funding will be set aside as a contingency to support response to potential unusual mortality events, or UMEs, that could be declared based on dolphin deaths in the Barataria Basin. Some fishery resources of commercial value will also be impacted. Due to salinity changes in the basin, brown shrimp and oyster populations will be reduced and/or relocated. It's worth noting that some changes to these resources would continue to occur without the project as current trends continued in the basin. But with the projects, these effects will be accelerated. Measures to address impacts to oysters include establishment of new public seed grounds, providing culture material for public and private growing areas, enhancement of oyster broodstock reefs, and assistance with implementing off-bottom culture techniques. For shrimp, efforts include provisioning of vessel refrigeration to improve catch quality and value, and funding gear improvements to increase efficiency. For both fisheries, investments will be made in training to improve existing business or transition to new careers, and funding of marketing to improve value of catch. Through other restoration planning, the Louisiana TIG has already committed $26 million to oyster restoration, including development and operations of the oyster hatchery on Grand Isle, development of a brood reef program, and past and future placement of culture material on public seed grounds. Diverting water into the Barataria Basin will increase water levels and is expected to impact communities outside of levee systems. Subsidence and sea level rise are predicted to increase flooding in most of these areas to nearly year-round by 2027, even without the diversion. But diversion operations are anticipated to result in more frequent inundation in the near term. For example, at Grand Bayou, proposed project operations are projected to increase the number of days of flooding by 45 days per year in 2030, but by only 5 days per year in 2050 in comparison to the future without project. Because most homes outside the levee systems are elevated, it's not anticipated that operations will flood structures, but will cause more frequent inundation of roads, docks, and other infrastructure, like sewage treatment systems. To address impacts, the project includes funding to raise homes, roads, and improve community infrastructure, and to address needs on individual properties such as docks and septic systems. CPRA is also proposing voluntary easements in communities outside of levee systems to compensate owners for property impacts. CPRA is open to discussion regarding fee acquisition of property if requested by the landowner. Lastly, data from operations will be used to evaluate operational regimes that limit impacts while meeting project objectives. This is an overview of the process we've discussed today, from the beginning of our work on the PDARP through the release of this draft Phase 2 restoration plan. Based on public input, we'll release a final restoration plan that will incorporate the feedback we get from you during this public review period. In parallel with our Deepwater Horizon restoration planning process, The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has led the development of a draft environmental impact statement, or EIS, as part of their permit process. You'll learn more about that in their presentation on the draft EIS. We want to hear from you. You can submit comments on the restoration plan through the web address, mailing address, or phone number listed on this slide. Unless specified otherwise, or applicable to only one document, any comments submitted will be considered in the Louisiana TIG restoration plan and the EIS, so you only need to submit your comment once. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Brad and Mel. Now that you are up to date on the project details and the draft Phase 2 restoration plan, I'll explain the draft EIS in more detail. The draft environmental impact statement for the proposed Midbarataria Sediment Diversion project is approximately 1,600 pages. It is a very large document with material that can get technical at times. Some of you may read the draft EIS from cover to cover, but most of you will have interest in only a couple areas of the document. By going through what is available to you in each chapter of the draft EIS, I hope to make finding what you wish to review a little bit easier. First is the table of contents. Use it as your guide to the draft EIS. Each chapter is broken into sections and then more specific subsections, like the example for Chapter 3 shown here. Notice that the page numbers begin with the chapter, 3 in this case, then the page number where the topic begins. The table of contents also includes the page numbers to all of the tables and figures in the draft EIS. It also includes the list of appendices. Next is the executive summary. The executive summary describes the proposed action, lists the purpose and need along with the alternatives analyzed in the draft EIS, and summarizes the potential environmental impacts. The executive summary is intended to be a non-technical and condensed version of the draft EIS. If you plan to comment or have an interest in the proposed project, you may want to begin your review with this section of the draft EIS. Reading it may give you all the information you need, or it can help you flag chapters and sections of the draft EIS you may want to review in more detail. Chapter 1 establishes the draft EIS purpose and need. The purpose and need statement is considered to be a foundational piece of the document because it helps determine which alternatives will be carried forward in the EIS analysis. As we have discussed, this draft EIS serves many different agencies, but for the Corps, the meat of the purpose and need statement is underlined for you here. You can also reference Chapter 1 for project background and history, a summary of previous studies, a list of Corps of Engineers civil works projects within the proposed Midbarataria Sediment Diversion project area, EIS scope and relevant issues, and a list of agency roles and responsibilities. Chapter 2 is where you will find information about the alternatives evaluated in the draft EIS. It explains how the Corps, in coordination with the TIG and cooperating agencies, developed a screening criteria to evaluate a wide range of alternatives, including coastal restoration methods, project locations, flow capacity, and operational triggers, to arrive at the range of alternatives shown here. The draft EIS carries forward 6 alternatives and the no action alternative for further analysis. The 6 alternatives are all sediment diversions at variable maximum flow rates. A variable flow up to 75,000 cubic feet per second, which is CPRAs, or the applicant's preferred alternative. A variable flow of up to 50,000 cubic feet per second, and a variable flow of up to 150,000 cubic feet per second. Marsh terracing in the outfall area was an alternative considered for each flow capacity. I included a marsh terracing example over to the side for you, but in general, they are designed to be little sediment catchers. Chapter 2 also includes a comparative summary of all the potential impacts for each alternative. If you are a casual reviewer, after the executive summary, this table, Table 2.9-1, will help you understand the construction and operational impact determinations for each alternative listed here. The Affected Environment chapter gives a description of the existing conditions and trends in the project area, which may be affected by each alternative. It establishes a baseline that we can then use to evaluate impacts in Chapter 4, the Environmental Consequences chapter. Chapters 3 and 4 are broken down into 22 distinct resource areas as listed here. The Environmental Consequences chapter is perhaps the most important chapter of the draft EIS because it explains the potential positive and negative impacts for each sediment diversion alternative in comparison to the trends and conditions from Chapter 3. Chapter 4 is where you would go if you want a more technical explanation of the proposed project's direct, indirect, and cumulative impacts during construction and operation. In the draft EIS, construction impacts are considered over a 5-year time frame. The operational impacts spanned over a 50-year projection. Impacts are assessed for both context and intensity. Context helps you understand the duration of an impact and uses terms like temporary, short-term, long-term, and permanent. Intensity helps you understand the severity of an impact and uses terms like no impact and negligible, minor, moderate, or major impacts. For each resource, the context and intensity is defined, followed by the analysis of each alternative in comparison to the no action. Each section ends with the impact determination. In addition to impacts, Chapter 4 includes a mitigation summary outlining CPRA's proposed avoidance, minimization, and mitigation measures. By now, you've heard a lot about the core permit decision and the TIG funding decision, but there are a number of other laws and policies the draft EIS will inform. Some examples include the Endangered Species Act, Fish and Wildlife Coordination Act, and the National Historic Preservation Act. Chapter 5 summarizes the means of compliance with all statutes, orders, and policies. Chapter 6 lists the names and qualifications of the individuals primarily responsible for writing the draft EIS. Chapter 7 discusses the past, ongoing, and future public involvement opportunities associated with this review. Also, the draft EIS is littered with acronyms. Chapter 8 has a list of all of them in alphabetical order for your reference. And Chapter 9 is the index, which gives page numbers where keywords and topics can be found throughout the draft EIS. I like to think of Chapter 10 and the appendices as our way of showing our work. Chapter 10 gives a reference list of all the best available science and literature used to help with the analysis and drafting of the EIS. The appendices are approximately 6,000 pages of 20 technical reports, studies, and analysis that was considered when drafting the EIS. The modeling and technical reports that I mentioned today earlier by CPRA can be found in this part of the document. Before I wrap up, I want to remind you that the draft EIS for the proposed Midbarataria Sediment Diversion project is a large document that can be technical. It is available for the casual reviewer with the executive summary, comparative summary of alternatives table, and the table of contents to help you find areas in the draft EIS of your interest. From there, it ranges in complexity as you read through the draft EIS chapters, ending with Chapter 10 and the appendices for those who really want to dig deep into the analysis. In conclusion, I want to thank you for your participation and remind you that your comments play an important role in our process. So please send us your feedback by May 4th, 2021, by either the comment portal we discussed earlier, by traditional mail to the Corps of Engineers, and if you prefer to provide oral comments, please leave a message at 866-211-9205. Thank you.
Thank you to all the speakers who recorded those presentations. If you'd like to watch the videos again, They are available on the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers website at the link that is now being circulated in the webinar chat. Now we're going to start the public comment portion of tonight's meeting. When you registered for the webinar, we asked if you wanted to make comment during the meeting. We currently have 6 individuals signed up to give comment so far. We will keep the webinar running for public comment for the next 2 hours or so you have lots of time if you change your mind. If you do not sign up to speak but would like to do so, please type your name in the questions box, and that name will be given to me and placed into the speaker's queue. If you're not comfortable speaking your public comment, you also have the opportunity to place your comment in the chat function, and Mr. Brad Laborde will speak your comment. I'll pause at this time and give our interpreters a chance to give instructions in Spanish, Vietnamese, and Khmer. Ms. Soto, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Ahora comenzaremos la sección de comentarios del público de la reunión. Cuando se registró para el seminario web, le preguntamos si quería hacer un comentario durante la reunión. Durante las siguientes 2 horas o más, continuaremos con el seminario web para comentarios del público. Llamaremos a la persona por su primer nombre y al mismo tiempo el nombre de la siguiente persona en la lista, de modo que tenga algo de tiempo para prepararse. Cuando llamemos su nombre, quitaremos el modo mudo de su línea y tendrá 3 minutos para hablar. Gracias.
Thank you. Mr. Nguyen?
Bây giờ chúng ta sẽ bắt đầu phần bình luận công khai của cuộc họp. Khi bạn đăng ký hội thảo trên web, chúng tôi đã hỏi bạn có muốn đưa ra nhận xét trong cuộc họp không? Chúng tôi sẽ tiếp tục chạy hội thảo trên web để lấy ý kiến công chúng trong 2 giờ tới hoặc lâu hơn. Chúng tôi sẽ gọi tên của người đầu tiên và đồng thời tên của người tiếp theo trong hàng để bạn có một chút thời gian chuẩn bị. Khi chúng tôi gọi tên bạn, chúng tôi sẽ bắt tiếng đường dây của bạn và bạn sẽ có 3 phút để nói. Tôi sẽ trực tiếp dịch nếu bạn có cho ý kiến bằng tiếng Việt. Thank you.
And Mr. Tay.
Thank you. ឥឡូវនេះយើងនឹងចាប់ផ្ដើមផ្នែកស្ដាប់មតិសាធារណៈនៃកិច្ចប្រជុំនេះនៅពេលដែលអ្នកចុះឈ្មោះចូលរួមសិក្ខាសាលាតាមអ៊ីនធឺណិតនេះយើងបានសួរថាតើអ្នកចង់ផ្ដល់មតិក្នុងអំឡុងពេលប្រជុំឬអត់ប្រសិនជាអ្នកមិនបានចុះឈ្មោះជាមុនហើយអ្នកចង់បញ្ចេញយោបល់នៅពេលនេះសូមអ្នកសរសេរឈ្មោះអ្នកនៅក្នុងប្រអប់សំណួរយើងនឹងបញ្ចូលឈ្មោះអ្នកទៅក្នុងជួរអ្នករងចាំបញ្ចេញយោបល់យើងនឹងបន្តសិក្ខាសាលាតាមអ៊ីនធឺណិតសម្រាប់មតិសាធារណៈនេះក្នុងរយៈពេល2ម៉ោងយើងនឹងហៅឈ្មោះបុគ្គលទី1និងឈ្មោះបុគ្គលបន្ទាប់ក្នុងជួររងចាំក្នុងពេលតែមួយដើម្បីឲ្យអ្នកមានពេលខ្លះក្នុងការត្រៀមខ្លួននៅពេលដែលយើងហៅឈ្មោះអ្នកយើងនឹងបើកសំឡេងខ្សែទូរស័ព្ទរបស់អ្នកហើយអ្នកមានរយៈពេល3នាទីសម្រាប់បញ្ចេញយោបល់សូមអរគុណ Thank you.
Thank you, translators. At this time, I'd like to remind you that representatives from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, CPRA, NOAA, and other Louisiana Trustee Implementation Group members, including the U.S. Department of the Interior, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture, are on the webinar to listen to your public comments. The representatives will listen to your comment. However, panel members may provide clarifications and information. As a reminder, all attendees are muted automatically. We will unmute you when it is your turn to speak. Also, if you are viewing the webinar and have called in using a phone and are planning to speak, you must enter your individual audio PIN. And please place a pound sign in front of the PIN number and a pound sign immediately following the PIN number. Please note that this PIN is different than the access code that was given to you. Please also follow any notifications to unmute yourself. As shown on the slide, if you're using the phone, please make sure your computer audio is not selected. We will call the first person's name and at the same time the next person in line so that you will have a little bit more time to prepare. When we call your name, we will unmute your line and you will have 3 minutes to speak. I thank you in advance for respecting the 3-minute rule. Again, please state your name, and if you're representing an organization, please state the name of the organization prior to making your comments. The first 6 individuals are as follows: Corey Sparks, Barbara Como, Kimberly Raher, Rosina Philippe, Steve Dillard, and Valerie Ramirez. At this time, Corey Sparks, you have the floor, and please start off by stating your name, and if you're representing an organization, the name of your organization. Please proceed.
You, Reverend Corey Sparks, and I'm representing the Commission on the Stewardship of the Environment of the Louisiana Interchurch Conference. We've worked since the 1980s to protect the coast and been involved in public hearings like this one because we feel there is a moral call to protect what's left of Louisiana wetlands. In Psalm 24, we hear the earth is the Lord's and all that is in it. I want to say that we strongly support the Midbarataria diversion. We've followed the progress closely since 2017 and see it as an opportunity to correct a mistake that we made back in 1927 when we levied the river and disrupted deltaic processes. We can correct that mistake now. We have the way forward, and of course we understand that mitigation needs to be taken in order to support those who will be affected, including fishers and oystermen. I'll cede the balance of my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment, Reverend Sparks.
Thank you, Mr. Sparks. The next individual to give public comment is Barbara Como, followed by Kimberly Raher. Ms. Como, the floor is yours. Ms. Como, if you will look at your webinar interface, if the microphone icon is not green, if you will take your mouse and click on the microphone icon and turn it green, you will unmute yourself. If you can hear my voice, Ms. Como, you are up to give public comment. And again, if your microphone icon is red, if you'll just take your mouse and hover over the microphone icon and click on it once, it'll turn green, and then we can hear you if you're speaking.
Hello.
There you go. We can hear you, Ms. Como.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry. I was out. I wasn't here, and my husband was listening because I just walked in. So I'm sorry for taking up your time.
No worries. Please proceed.
Yeah, we're going to just comment. My husband and I we have a home in Lake Hermitage, and we're very concerned about the rise in water due to the diversion project. And, you know, there's just a lot down here as far as the water rising over our dock, the water coming in through the backyard, into the boat shed. It's just, it's a constant, you know. And so we're really concerned about the additional water that's going to come in, and also whether we'll be able to get to our home. That's a concern. That's where we stand right now. Very concerned about the rise in water.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Como. Oh, if you have more, please go ahead.
No, he accidentally touched it.
Oh, okay. So yeah, if you are interested in flooding impacts, I would direct you to our socioeconomic section in the draft EIS. That's chapter 4, section 13, 4.13.5 for the operational impacts. There are also mitigative measures that CPRA is proposing for this project. Mitigation can be found in 4.27 as well as Appendix R of the EIS. We also have a public health and safety section where we talk about the annual days of flooding that may happen with respect to this project, as well as the no action along with the other alternatives that we've carried forth. That section, or that chapter, chapter 4, 4.20 is the section for public health and safety. In addition to the EIS, CPRA is coordinating a series of community level meetings. So I would say to keep an eye out for that. Those meetings would not be held in conjunction with the Corps, so it would be separate. But if you have an opportunity to sit down with CPRA, you may be able to provide your concerns and input to them so that they can consider it for their mitigation. Because in the end, if the Corps can issue a permit for this project, CPRA would be responsible for implementing any of the proposed mitigation that you would see in that mitigation plan. So I thank you once again for your comments.
Ms. Como, did that conclude your comment? Okay, Ms. Como, if you had additional comment, if you'll just respond back and we'll put you back in the queue. Next individual to give public comment is Ms. Kimberly Raher, followed by Rosina Felipe. And Ms. Raher, if you'll just begin by stating your name for the record, and if you are representing an organization, the name of the organization. You have 3 minutes. You are ready to proceed.
Okay. Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Great. Hi, my name is Kimberly Ryer. I'm a resident of Louisiana. I'm raising 3 little girls here, and I want them to have the opportunity to live here safely into the future. I hope they will grow to enjoy the traditions and the bounty of Louisiana. I'm hoping they'll all become skilled fishermen, but we'll see about that. I'm also the executive director of a group called the Coalition to Restore Coastal Louisiana, or CRCL. The CRCL is the first coastal advocacy organization in the state. And the organization came together in the 80s when we were all together realizing the challenges around coastal land loss. And some of our earliest reports concluded that sediment diversions were the best solution and perhaps the only long-term sustainable solution for reversing our land loss. Organization has advocated for sediment diversions for decades, since the 1980s. We are pleased and actually relieved in a lot of ways to finally be at what we hope is the finish line for moving forward with these projects for the first large-scale sediment diversion in the state. We recognize that there's still questions about how we do this, but we think it's time that we do it. And we very much appreciate the thought and diligence that's gone into the analysis of what we could do and what it means for all of us in terms of the benefits and also the challenges. We believe the sediment diversions will be the most impactful projects among those proposed in the Coastal Master Plan, that they're needed for rebuilding our coast. We support the general approach of using the power of the river to sustain the Delta, and also the specific approach of the proposed diversion. I mean, in short, we support the preferred alternative, and we support the use of Deepwater Horizon funding to fund the project. I want to take the opportunity to congratulate the Corps and all those involved on creating the ambitious and extensive report. We recognize a lot of work has gone into it. And as the project proceeds, we want to urge the Corps and CPRA and all those involved to continue in efforts to center community members and community member concerns in developing the mitigation stewardship plans. Although these projects will have wide beneficial economic impacts, we recognize they will provide or result in negative impacts to some communities, as we've been hearing. And we think it's really important that we recognize this and grapple with it. We really appreciate just how clear and thorough the analysis has been in considering these challenges. We envision safe communities, thriving fisheries as part of what we're all working to achieve, and we know all of you do too. We really appreciate the efforts, and we appreciate the opportunity to talk tonight. We'll provide extensive detailed comments that are much more technical. But for now, I just want to thank everyone who's taking the time to comment on this, and those presenting, all the teams they represent, for working so hard to get us to this stage and advancing our understanding about the challenges we face and what we can do. So thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Okay, thanks for that comment. Your advocacy for the project or your support for the project is noted. I would let the group know. I think you have an understanding of it, but just for everyone else on the line, that the project still very much is in review by the Corps of Engineers. We're still evaluating the project, and we do believe that the draft EIS applies the best science, engineering, and information that we have available. So your comments about the thoroughness of the document is noted. After we reevaluate and develop the draft EIS, the Corps will have some work to do with weighing the pros and cons of the project to determine whether or not the project's in the public's interest. And at that point, we would make our decision whether or not to issue, deny, or proffer another alternative to CPRA for their project. So just wanted to remind folks of that. And also, I have the same hopes, having a 7- and a 4-year-old myself, that they'll be able to grow up here as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you for your comment. Before we proceed with the next public commenters, I just want to remind everyone that if you want to make public comment, simply type your name into the questions box and we'll place you into the speaker's queue. And you can also utilize the chat function if you do not want to give a verbal comment, but you wanted to get your public comment into the record via this meeting. The next individuals to give public comment are going to be Rosina Felipe or Felipe, Steve Dillard, Valerie Ramirez, and Thomas Holco. Rosina, Felipe, you're next. Please state your name.
Okay, my name is Rosina Felipe, and I'm an elder with the Grand Bayou Village Atakapa Ishak Shawasha people. And my question, every day Louisiana loses about an estimated 25 acres of wetlands. And I'm concerned about how does this number within the same time frame compare to the amount of land proposed to be built by the Midbaritaria diversion? What is the projected amount of land estimated to be lost before balance is achieved once the or if and once the Midbaritaria diversion comes online? And I know there have been some talk about mitigation efforts for communities during some of the negative impacts. And I would like to know, will there be proactive measures to these mitigations ahead of the implementation of Midbaritaria, and what does that time frame look like?
Thanks, Ms. Felipe, and it's good to hear from you again. I know that you were around to make comments during the scoping period as well. So it is good to hear from you again. Of course, you know a little bit about this project. I can't give you the technical responses to your questions right now on the fly, but it is something that we can take a look at and maybe provide an update later on in the meeting today. But your comments are noted and something that we will evaluate and look at for the final EIS.
Thank you for your comment. The next individuals will give public comment: Steve Dillard, followed by Valerie Ramirez, followed by Thomas Holco and Brian Moore. At this time, Steve Dillard, the floor is yours. Steve Dillard, if you can hear my voice, you can go ahead and proceed. You appear to be unmuted and should be able to give your public comment. We will keep him in the queue and proceed to Valerie Ramirez. Ms. Ramirez, please start with your name, and you have 3 minutes to give your public comment.
Hello, my name is.
Yes, please proceed.
Hello, my name is Valerie Ramirez. I'm originally not a native to Louisiana. This is honestly the first time I've heard about what was going on and with the situation. So my question is, what is the statistics of Louisiana citizens that are aware of this project, if there are any? And I've been reading a couple of articles, and there isn't a really one number that is consistent on the amount that is being spent on the project, along with the time frame.
Okay, thanks for your comment, and thanks for your interest in the project. It sounds like you've taken an interest here recently, so we can give you a little bit of an update there. So the cost of the project is going to fluctuate a bit just because construction prices change over time. So it will be hard to give an exact amount of what the price may be to construct the project. With respect towards once approved, if approved, the project is expected to take 3 to 5 years to construct. Once it's constructed, it would begin operating, and it has a project life, or at least for this review, it has a project life of 50 years. Thanks for your comment.
Thank you very much. I'd like to return to Steve Dillard. Mr. Dillard, if you can hear my voice, please proceed with your comment. And if you're having difficulties with your audio, the screen that is currently up will walk you through unmuting yourself. If you have a red microphone, you'll need to hover over it with your mouse and click on it, and it will turn green. And once you see the green microphone, you're ready to proceed. And if you're calling in with your phone, the comments on the screen at this time can help you walk through on your phone. And if you get through on the phone, please make sure the computer is self-muted, or we'll get feedback. We'll keep trying, Mr. Dillard. Next individual to give public comment is Thomas Holco, followed by Brian Moore. Mr. Holco, if you can hear us, please proceed. Thomas Holco, you're now up to speak. Again, if you're having audio difficulty, you can look at the screen and it'll walk you through to unmute yourself. Okay. We think that Mr. Holco is Getting close. If you see that microphone icon next to the word audio, if it is red, if you'll just click on that, it'll turn green, and then we can hear you. Okay, we'll continue to reach out to Mr. Holco, and we'll go next to Brian Moore. Brian Moore, you are now up to give your public comment.
Hi, good evening. Thanks for having me. Thanks for doing all you're doing. And really thanks to everyone on the panel for all you've done to move the ball forward with the Midbarataria Sediment Diversion. It's important to me, and it's important to the organization I represent, which is the National Audubon Society, and our over 2 million members nationally, and also important to us is 26,000 acres that we own and manage and operate in Louisiana that we've had for nearly 100 years. So we feel like we have a pretty big stake in what's happening with the Louisiana coast for lots of reasons. And we would like to stand in support of the Midbarataria Sediment Diversion. It's important for a whole lot of reasons. One reason for us as the National Audubon Society, our focus is on wildlife and habitat and particularly birds. And 40% of birds that migrate through the US, the United States, at some point in time in their migration or other habits, stop on the coast of Louisiana. So there could not be a more important place for habitat for birds and other wildlife. And this Midbarataria Sediment Diversion has a real chance to help bring back some of the wetlands that birds and other wildlife find important. I think also important is what the Midbarataria Sediment Diversion will do to help stabilize the whole ecosystem and also help provide some protection for people and communities, and of course for the economy of coastal Louisiana, which are all important to us. And finally, I'd like to say I'm glad to see that there's a significant amount of funding in the proposal to work with potentially impacted communities. We think that the trustees and everyone involved should really work as closely and collaboratively with the potentially affected communities as possible, and do that in a transparent way, so that you know we can all be a part of the process. And that is it from me. Thank you very much, and have a great evening.
Thank you for your comment, Mr. Moore.
Next individual to give public comment is Diane Campbell. And please state your name for the record. And if you're representing an organization, please give the name of the organization. You now have 3 minutes, Ms. Campbell.
Hi, my name is Diane Campbell. I'm a resident of Lake Hermitage area. And I had a couple of questions and also have a comment. I too, living in the Lake Hermitage area, can see a need for us to take some type of action for the coast erosion. Actually, you can tell within the last 10 years how massive it's become. But part of my question has to do with the type of diversion that we're speaking of. If I'm understanding correctly, you're going to transport the sediment by moving water. And I'm just wondering, why is that favorable to actually, I know when we had now Lieutenant Governor Billy Nungasser as parish president, he proposed doing dredges and moving the fill in that manner to be successful. That was one of my questions. And the other part that I'm questioning is, by pumping in all of this water from the river, we all know that the river is not free of any type of hazards or chemicals. We just recently had where millions or billions of tiny pellets were discharged, and no one took claim to that being a hazardous material, and they're still sitting out there. So you're going to have that type of contamination introduced into the bayous, what are you doing for protecting fish from that?
Okay, thank you for your comment. It did sound like, at least the beginning of your comment, you had a question that fell along the lines of alternatives. We do have a comprehensive alternative write-up in Chapter 2 of the EIS, and it does talk about different coastal restoration tools, including marsh creation and some of the dredging alternatives that maybe you were making reference to with your comment. So I would suggest that you reference that section. In addition to that, there are other projects that are going on in the basin that, you know, this project is being reviewed as a sediment diversion, but there are other projects in the works that are along the lines of coastal restoration. And it's not really a choice of one or the other. It's, I think CPRA would say the diversion would work in conjunction with some of these projects. So let's see, we may have to circle back for a couple of your other comments, and we can update you where to reference some of the material to answer some of your other questions in a bit.
Hi, Brad, and this is Mel Landry from the Louisiana Trustee Implementation Group. I work for NOAA as a trustee with that group, and I just wanted to also point to our strategic restoration plan for the Barataria Basin, where the trustees evaluated multiple approaches to restoring for injuries caused by the spill in the basin. And the trustees actually selected in that plan 3 approaches, one of which is a large-scale sediment diversion, which we're evaluating here, but we also selected large-scale marsh creation and ridge restoration. And those other 2 projects will harvest sediment from the river and pump it via pipeline to restore wetlands in the basin. And those 2 have actually already been approved for construction and are expected to begin construction this year.
Thank you very much. I'd like to go back to Mr. Thomas Holco. Mr. Holco, you can proceed with your public comment. And Mr. Dillard, if you're still on and you can hear us, we're going to come to you next. We know that we're working through your technical difficulties as well. Okay, well, Mr. Holco did something that is very useful and helpful, and I'd like to explain what he did. He sort of pivoted to the chat box, and he has placed his comments in the chat box. And so at this time, I'll ask Mr. Laborde to go through those items in the chat box, and that is an option. If you are having a technical issue, or if you just don't want to give a verbal comment, but you still want your comment to be a part of this meeting, I invite you to go to the chat box and simply type in your comment or your question, and we'll get to those at this time. Mr. Laborde.
Yeah, so I can run through some of the chats here. I don't know if this will capture all of his comments, so if there's more that he'd like to say here verbally, I would hope that he stick around and try to work through his issues. But there was a comment that he made, or a question about whether or not the Park Service, the Jefferson Parish Council, the Lafitte Area Independent Levy District, and the town of Lafitte, what were their positions on the project. I don't know what their position is on the project. We have about 2,000 comments in-house. We have people monitoring the comments as they roll in. I don't believe that we've gotten comments from any one of those entities at this time. I will say that the Department of Interior, to which the National Park Service is a bureau of, is a cooperating agency on the EIS, and they're also part of the Trustee implementation group, which drafted the restoration plan. And you heard from Mel a little bit earlier, and he's one of the leads on that. So We haven't received any official comments, but they are, at least the National Park Service, by way of Department of Interior, is involved with the review. He had a second chat here that had to do with oyster beds in the Barataria Basin, whether there was historical information. In Chapter 3 of the EIS, in aquatics, that would be Section 3.10.5.2. There is background information regarding oyster beds that can be found there. In addition to that section in Chapter 3, we have the commercial fisheries section, which is 3.14.3 of the draft EIS, to find some information about oysters. Your question was specific maybe to references and historical information. So when you do reference that information, there will be references available to you that you could then reference Chapter 10, which is our references section, that you can line up some of the references that are cited in Chapter 3. And if you wanted to find those specific papers, you could find the citations there and look those up. And once again, I don't know if that addresses your full comment, sir, but you know, if it doesn't, then please continue to try and work through the technical difficulties that we all experience with these virtual calls. I know we've done one today that I had an issue with, so I can relate to that. We did get a comment via the chat that was asked to be read in its entirety, so I'll do so now. It's from Mr. Alan Drake. It's has any consideration been given to aerial seeding of black mangroves in order to stabilize newly formed land from hurricanes and other storms? Even if a frost kills seeded trees every decade or so, the dead trees will stabilize new soil, and more can be seeded the next year. Thank you for that suggestion. I do not think that aerial seeding of black mangroves or any other plant or shrub species has been considered, but it is something that maybe we can look at for the final. There is a full suite of alternatives that you can review and take a look at. Well, both alternatives and project design features that you could take, you can consider in Chapter 2 for your review. That's the alternatives section. And then there's a little bit more information in Appendix D. That would be the alternatives section. Again, that's Appendix D. Let's see. I can circle back. Do we want to try the folks on the phone once again, or do you want me to circle back with some of these other items here, Mr. Franklin?
The phone queue is idle, if you would proceed.
Okay. So earlier there was a comment that involved comparing land building and land loss. I would suggest that folks that have an interest in that can take a look at Chapter 4 of the EIS. That'd be Chapter 4, Section 6.5, and that's the Wetland Resources and Waters of the U.S. chapter. In particular, there's a table in there, Table 4.6-3, that provides information for each alternative by decade over the 50-year analysis period. So again, that write-up would include a discussion about the projected acres of wetlands created and/or maintained by the proposed project over time, as compared to the projected acreage that would exist over time if the project were not implemented, or the no action alternative of the EIS. I think there was a prior comment too about funding, and I had said that, you know, it's a little bit of an unknown, but I do have a note here that says the Louisiana Trustee Implementation Group has identified this project as a preferred alternative, and they're willing to provide up to $2 billion in funding for the diversion. So I wanted to make an update there. There was also Ms. Ramirez's comment, had a question about how many people are aware of the project. We do have a pretty extensive mailing list, so all of our public notices have been mailed out to those folks, either by email or traditional mail. And folks that participate today that may not be on that address list, if you've registered, we can add you to that for future mailings. Let's see, the number of commenters and state of residency is provided in Chapter 7. So public involvement, the public involvement section of the FEIS. Hold up, I'm kind of botching this. Yeah, so we don't have an exact percentage. It's impossible for us to know that, but we do monitor the people who do comment, and that'll be available in Chapter 7, the public involvement chapter of the final EIS. Let's see. Scrolling through to a couple other chats here. Oh, this is Ms. Ramirez's again. All right, there's a chat question about the companies that'll be associated with this project. The implementation of the project will be conducted by CPRA if we can issue a permit for this project. And it would be required to follow Louisiana's public procurement laws, which I am not aware of. So I can't shed any light on that, but companies that have already been involved in the project can be found through the Louisiana Division of Administration and the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority. Let's see. Give me a moment here. All right. There was a part of a verbal comment that had to do with chemicals, hazards, and contamination. We do have a section in the EIS that can cover that in more detail. Folks can check out Chapter 4, Section 5. That's the surface water and sediment quality for contamination. Chapter 4, Section 10, that's the aquatic resources section. You can get some information about potential impacts to fish at that location. And then Chapter 4.21 for navigation, information on dredging due to the project. So I wanted to follow up there. Okay. I think that pretty much catches us up on the chat. There's a few more here that we need to further flesh out before we talk about in detail. So I'm showing 7:30, Mr. Franklin. I don't know if now is a good time for a bit of a break. We can work on some of these responses, as well as see if there's folks that still want to get in the queue for additional comment or for a new comment.
We've got one gentleman who's been very resilient. If we can get him in, Mr. Dillard, we are ready for your comment. Mr. Dillard, please proceed.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, sir.
Oh, awesome. I thank you all for your patience. My IT neighbor just showed up and pressed the right button. So I thank y'all. I thank you. Thank you, James. All right, guys. Look, I appreciate it. Thank you for your patience. I know I only have 3 minutes and it took 45 to connect. So here we go. My name is Steve Dillard. I live at 603 Martin Lane, commonly known as Happy Jack, down in Port Sulphur. I've been a resident down there a long time, been in and out. It's a great place. I want to see it stay. I appreciate and love the coastal restoration that y'all are doing. I'm all for it. far coastal restoration. I don't know if your approach is correct, but this is not the time or place to go into that. It's too detailed and only have 3 minutes. My immediate concern is the flooding of the road on Happy Jack. If y'all are going to raise this water to the levels y'all are talking about, we already can't get in and out of the road to begin with. Y'all are going to have to significantly raise and modify this road. This is nothing but a little bit of shell gravel road that all we got. And it floods out right now beaucoup times a year. So that's issue one. Secondly, my dock at present goes underwater. So you're going to add more water to it. I'm not going to be able to use the underside of my house. If I can't use the underside of my house, you're going to say, okay, we'll mitigate and raise your dock. There you go. I like that. Go ahead and raise my dock. But now you got to turn around. You got to raise my count because now I can't get underneath my house. So I got some issues. And the only other comment I got out there, and I appreciate all the translators that's on there, but how come we ain't got no Cajun translator? And that's just a joke, but I love y'all. So that's what I got. And the other thing in your presentation, Brad, that you had ongoing, I believe, y'all talked about you don't have any present. Y'all did a bunch of computer models and this, that, and the other that y'all created to speculate what may happen with this river diversion and so on. Well, you got a great model right across the street, Mardi Gras Pass. What has Mardi Gras Pass done for us? Has it been positive? Has it been negative? And I'll go ahead and leave all my comments there. And I hope someone circles back. And please don't cite chapters for books for me to read. I love you, Brad. Thank you. But no, I need to know specifically, are y'all going to take care of the road, the docks, the houses? What are y'all going to do to mitigate the increased water? And I thank y'all for your patience.
Thank you for the comment. I like the energy that you brought, so I appreciate that. And I know it maybe is a little frustrating to hear me read off sections and chapters to you, but at least for us at the Corps, we do feel like the document kind of speaks for itself. I'm not going to tell you to go read it, but I can't necessarily give you an answer there either. But I will say also that as far as mitigation goes, it wouldn't be the Corps that would be implementing that. If the Corps did approve this project, it would be CPRA that's responsible for implementing any of the mitigation that would be addressed in their mitigation plan. Again, mitigation is something that's in the EIS. I believe it's chapter 4.27, and also we have an appendix that would cover that as well. For raising roads and docks, I do believe that there is some information in there. Let's see. I lost my spot on the page here, but yeah. So I don't know if there's anything else to add there, and I apologize for being a little bland with my responses, but it's important for the Corps to point to the document as needed, because the Corps, we're just here in a regulatory capacity. At this time, the project's still very much in review, and we're non-biased with our review. We have a team of third-party contractors and subject matter experts that are going through, best available science and some of the information, putting together some of the information that's in the EIS. So I don't want to say something that would, make you believe that we're leaning one way or the other on this, because at this time we don't know ourselves where we're headed with our decision. So that's it for me.
Thank you. At this time, we're going to go on a break. But let me advise you that this does not mean that the portal is going to be closed. If you would like to get into the speaking queue, simply go into the questions box and type in your name, and you will be first in line when we come back from break. And we're going to propose to come back at 7:45 p.m. Central Standard Time. 7:45 p.m. Central Standard, we'll come back. If you also want to place your items in the chat box, feel free to do that as well. We will resume at 7:45. This portal will not close, and we'll come back on at that time. Thank you very much. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're now back from that brief break. And would just like to remind everyone, if they would like to get into the speaking queue, simply type your name into the questions box and we will call on you to do so. If you would like to give your public comment via the chat, that is also an option for you. And later this evening, we will give you the other methods of which you can offer your public comment. If I can ask Ms. Soto and followed by Mr. Nguyen and Mr. Tay to assist with giving these instructions, I would appreciate it.
Thank you. Ahora comenzaremos la sección de comentarios del público de la reunión. Cuando se registró para el seminario web, le preguntamos si quería hacer un comentario durante la reunión. Durante las siguientes horas, continuaremos con el seminario web para comentarios del público. Llamaremos a la persona por su primer nombre y al mismo tiempo el nombre de la siguiente persona en la lista, de modo que tenga algo de tiempo para prepararse. Cuando llamemos su nombre, quitaremos el modo mudo de su línea y tendrá 3 minutos para hablar. Gracias.
Thank you. Mr. Nguyen.
Khi bạn đăng ký hội thảo trên web, chúng tôi đã hỏi bạn có muốn đưa ra nhận xét trong cuộc họp không? Chúng tôi sẽ tiếp tục chạy hội thảo trên web để lấy ý kiến công chức trong 2 giờ tới hoặc lâu hơn. Chúng tôi sẽ gọi tên của người đầu tiên và đồng thời tên của người tiếp theo trong hạn để bạn có một chút thời gian chuẩn bị. Khi chúng tôi gọi tên bạn, chúng tôi sẽ bật tiếng đường dây của bạn và bạn sẽ có 3 phút để nói. Tôi sẽ trực tiếp dịch nếu bạn cho ý kiến bằng tiếng Việt. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen and Mr. Tay.
Thank you សូមជម្រាបសួរនៅពេលដែលអ្នកចុះឈ្មោះចូលរួមសិក្ខាសាលាតាមអ៊ីនធឺណិតនេះយើងបានសួរថាតើអ្នកចង់ផ្ដល់មតិក្នុងអំឡុងពេលប្រជុំឬអត់ប្រសិនជាអ្នកមិនបានចុះឈ្មោះជាមុនហើយឥឡូវនេះអ្នកចង់បញ្ចេញយោបល់សូមអ្នកសរសេរឈ្មោះអ្នកនៅក្នុងប្រអប់សំណួរយើងនឹងបញ្ចូលឈ្មោះអ្នកនៅក្នុងជួរអ្នករងចាំបញ្ចេញយោបល់អ្នកមានរយៈពេល 3 នាទីសម្រាប់បញ្ចេញយោបល់សូមអរគុណ Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to our translators. At this time, Mr. Laborde, the speaker's queue is idle. Do you have anything in the chat?
Yeah, I can circle back. Mr. Dillard, I had responded to his comment and I mentioned it earlier, but I don't think it was part of my response to him. So it sounded like, instead of directing him to parts of the EIS, he wanted to speak with people, and that's completely understandable. And I just wanted to remind folks of the community level meetings that CPRA is in the process of coordinating with residents of different communities further in the Barataria Basin. So I would suggest that you either reach out to CPRA. You can do that by email at coastal@la.gov to get more information about those meetings. I think there's also some mailouts proposed for those. So be on the lookout for that. Remind folks that that's not necessarily something that's going to be facilitated or attended by the Corps, but folks can attend those meetings and try to provide impact or feedback to CPRA about these impacts for consideration for their future mitigation efforts. So just a reminder there. Let's see. So there's a chat question about additional virtual meetings. This is our last meeting. However, we've held, counting this one, a total of 3 now. So those meetings will be available on the Corps website once we have them recorded and the transcripts ready. All that will be available there, so people can go back and re-review that. Also, these meetings are available on the Corps of Engineers Facebook page. So if people are more familiar with Facebook, they can check out the meetings there. And also remind folks that this meeting and these settings aren't the only way to comment. You can comment via traditional mail, our comment portal, or we have a phone number for folks, and we've reiterated that a few times here, but just wanted to bring that up again. However you choose to comment, they all carry similar weight. You know, we don't favor a verbal comment over a written comment or vice versa. So go ahead and get your comments in. We will accept those through May 4th. That means if on May 4th you're reviewing your last bit of the EIS and you want to get something out then, you can either email it or drop it in the mailbox. And as long as it's postmarked for May 4th, we'll go ahead and take that comment and make it part of the record for consideration with the final EIS. There's a question here about potential internships for working on the project. It's a smart and good question. We didn't outline internships in the EIS or the restoration plan. But Appendix R does have a monitoring and adaptive management plan. So you can see the ongoing efforts that are being conducted through operations. Again, if we work through this process and the Corps determines that we can issue a permit for it, as well as our TIG folks decide that they're going to fund this effort. So again, we're very much into the review portion of this project, so details aren't known at this point. But over time, once you know, it's known the direction of the project, and if there's construction activities, I think at that time CPRA might be ramping up, or some local universities or entities may be looking for intern options. But maybe by that point you'll have a job at the Corps or CPRA too. So don't sell yourself short there. Okay, we have another question here about land loss, day-to-day land loss as a result of the diversion. So yeah, so when it comes to land loss in the review of the project, I don't think we did a day-to-day comparison. If you do reference the section of the EIS, I apologize for my issues with the spreadsheet here today. I'll get that to y'all in a second, but we do have you know, a comparison by decade that kind of shows land loss rates versus what's expected as a result of the diversion if constructed, not just for the applicant's preferred, but also the alternatives as well. All right. So I think we talked about black mangroves earlier. There's another comment here about red mangroves being planted by shallow draft vessels for newly formed land. Again, that's a suggestion that we can make part of the record, and we'll consider that while we're developing the final EIS. Okay.
And while you're going through those chats, we do have another individual to give public comment.
Great.
Okay. At this time, I'd like to acknowledge Ms. Natalie Snyder to give public comment. You have 3 minutes, Ms. Snyder, and if you're representing an organization, if you'll state the name of the organization following your name, please proceed.
Thank you, Barry. My name is Natalie Snyder. I am the Senior Director of Coastal Resilience at the Environmental Defense Fund. And a few things I would like to compliment the team on is, number one, as in my previous life working on a lot of EISs and drafting those, it's a very complete and amazing document that you've put together. Number two, having the translation here on the webinar it's unfortunate it hasn't been as used as much as we would hope, but for all the translators that are here, we appreciate you being here and spending your time here, because it's important to at least have that inclusion and that availability of inclusion in this work. And we know in coastal Louisiana, we are diverse, and that's what makes us the gumbo, right? And I do look forward to the Cajun translated one pager on this project. So I'm looking forward to that coming. You know, Brad, you mentioned the operations and adaptive management, and I think that's where I want to focus my comment is, you know, making sure that people understand and being more clear about how this is not a project that is put in place and you walk away from. It is operated every day, every year, multiple years, and there's a lot of decisions that have to be made on a daily and annual basis about how operations occur, when it's open, when it's not. And so I commend CPRA for putting in the monitoring, putting in substantial money for the monitoring, to make sure that we understand what the response is of this ecosystem and these communities to this project, which is fundamentally important. I request that the adaptive management be expanded, the governance be more inclusive of not only the natural resource users, but the communities that are being impacted should be part of that conversation in that adaptive management program. But all in all, great job to all you guys in doing a very robust scientific analysis. And we look forward to working with you as the adaptive management program evolves over time. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for the comment and the kudos. We'll certainly accept that. Much appreciated. And I did like that you recognized our translators. It's important to us that they are here and available to folks should they want to comment. So that's definitely noted as well.
Thank you so very much. We also would like to remind anyone, there are still 66 individuals attending this webinar. And if you would like to make a comment, and we're in that portion of tonight's webinar to receive your comment, you simply just need to type your name into the questions box to get it into the speaking queue. And I'll ask Ms. Soto to assist with those instructions.
Thank you. Comenzaremos con la sección de comentarios del público de la reunión. Cuando se registró para el seminario web, le preguntamos si quería hacer un comentario durante la reunión. Durante las siguientes horas continuaremos con el seminario web para comentarios del público. Llamaremos a la persona por su primer nombre y al mismo tiempo el nombre de la siguiente persona en la lista, de modo que tenga algo de tiempo para prepararse. Cuando llamemos su nombre, quitaremos el modo mudo de su línea y tendrá 3 minutos para hablar. Gracias.
Thank you. Mr. Nguyen.
Khi bạn đăng ký hội thảo trên web, chúng tôi đã hỏi bạn có muốn đưa ra nhận xét trong cuộc họp không? Chúng tôi sẽ tiếp tục chạy hội thảo trên web để lấy ý kiến công chúng trong 2 giờ tới hoặc lâu hơn. Chúng tôi sẽ gọi tên của người đầu tiên và đồng thời tên của người tiếp theo trong hàng để bạn có một chút thời gian chuẩn bị. Khi chúng tôi gọi tên bạn, chúng tôi sẽ bật tiếng đường dây của bạn và bạn sẽ có 3 phút để nói. Tôi sẽ trực tiếp dịch nếu bạn có ý kiến bằng tiếng Việt. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen. Mr. Tay.
ជំរាបសួរនៅពេលដែលអ្នកចុះឈ្មោះចូលរួមសិក្ខាសាលាតាមអ៊ីនធឺណិតនេះយើងបានសួរថាតើអ្នកចង់ផ្ដល់មតិក្នុងអំឡុងពេលប្រជុំឬអត់ប្រសិនជាអ្នកមិនបានចុះឈ្មោះជាមុនហើយឥឡូវនេះអ្នកចង់បញ្ចេញយោបល់សូមអ្នកសរសេរឈ្មោះអ្នកនៅក្នុងប្រអប់សំណួរ យើងនឹងបញ្ចូលឈ្មោះអ្នកទៅក្នុងជួរអ្នករងចាំបញ្ចេញយោបល់អ្នកមានរយៈពេល3នាទីដើម្បីនឹងបញ្ចេញយោបល់ សូមអរគុណ Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tay. Kieran, if you could bring me to the slide, how to comment. I'd like to remind everyone that there are multiple ways to comment on the draft EIS or NRDA RP. You can take the final hour of tonight's meeting and you can make verbal comment. You could also go and submit your comments electronically at the top URL. You can use traditional mail and submit your written comments to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers at the address shown. And of course, that needs to be postmarked on or before May 4th. You can submit your oral comments after this evening's meeting by calling the toll-free number 866-211-9205. And tonight represents the last of 3 consecutive public meetings. And so there's an hour remaining on tonight's public meeting. And Ms. Laborde, do we have any items in the chat?
Yeah, the chat is a little bit more active than yesterday. So we have another request from Mr. Thomas Holco to read a comment aloud, which I will do. He says, I am a property owner in Lower Lafitte. It represents my home and business. I am an environmental armchair historian and believe in the concept of living with water. I am particularly concerned about mitigation. I will reserve my viewpoint. So first, I'd like to apologize and you know, I understand the frustrations with the technical issues and remind folks that the meeting is being recorded and will be available to folks on the Corps website. And again, it is on the Corps of Engineers New Orleans District, their Facebook page as well. For information on mitigation measures, I would suggest that you check out Appendix R of the EIS. That's the Mitigation and Monitoring and Adaptive Management Plan. All of that is CPRA's suggested measures for both mitigation and monitoring and adaptive management. Got a couple more here from Mr. Drake. One about the potential of a Category 4 or a 5 hurricane straight up the mouth of the Mississippi River, which is definitely a concern with or without diversion. And it's about storm surge. So the Corps did review an AdCirc study from CPRA. So we did do an analysis on that. I can get you some additional information where maybe you could find that here in a bit. But I would also remind you that per CPRA's operation plan, they do propose to close the structure during hurricanes and tropical storm activity. So there would be the potential for water to draw down in the basin before we have a tropical event should the project be constructed. There's one about, okay, so this might be a misunderstanding and it's probably my fault. So when I say 50-year design life, I don't mean the project from an engineering standard. It's the Corps' review period for the EIS. So we're just looking at the benefits and the detriments over time of the project over the 50-year analysis period. So we're not referring to the design life of the project itself. The Corps, we do have an interest in maintaining the federal levees at that location. And CPRA structure, we would expect them to maintain it to the Corps standard as well. So that's a separate process that we have here at the Corps. and it is part of this review. So sorry for the misunderstanding there. Okay, so there's an additional comment here about provisions being made for flows based upon real world experience rather than computer models. So there's a comment about 5,000 CFS, which is the base flow or proposed base flow. Tides and wind should require adjustments in flow as well as sea level rise. So again, that comment's noted. I mean, we understand that, and for a review purpose, it's not really, you don't want to throw in too many variables for the review. For us, it was important to understand when CPRA planned to turn the diversion both off and on so that we could get the full, we could try and capture the full impacts, whether it be benefit or a detriment associated with the project. There is some additional information. So yeah, this can be further explained in section 4.1 of the draft EIS. So I think it was brought up in the in Brad Barth's presentation, but when the river flow at the Belle Chase gauge in the Mississippi River is above 450,000 CFS, that's cubic feet per second, the flow through diversion will be in relation to the flow of the river. And again, my spreadsheet's jumping around today, and maybe it's my eyes too. It's getting late here, so I apologize for not being clear. But so okay, so when the flow of the river is at 450K, the diversion would be in operation, and that flow through the diversion would be dependent upon the flow at the gauge at that time once it goes over 450 CFS. Sorry, y'all. All right. All right, there's one or two more here that we're trying to flesh out more, and before we address those any further.
And while the team is working on those comments, again, we'll ask to see if there are any individuals who like to make public comment at this time. If so, if you will simply just type your name into the questions box, we can then acknowledge you properly. So we'll just take a brief pause here and see if there are any names that will come in through the questions box.
Okay, we have one here about the design life again. So just want to remind people, I mean, for our review period, the 50 years was something that was a reasonable and realistic time frame that we could make our best analysis guesses, I guess, so to speak. So beyond 50 years, or you could just say, you know, as time goes on, your guesses are going to be more and more, there's going to be more uncertainty there. So after 50 years, it was considered to us to be no longer useful to make those guesses. So it is a little arbitrary on, you know, where you pick to stop with your review, but 50 years was what we did for this analysis. And that's not to say if the project is still viable after 50 years, it wouldn't continue. It may, if constructed and permitted, but A lot of the things that we're talking about with respect to mitigation and adaptive management, I believe those things would still apply as well. And I think that gets us up to date with the chat.
Okay. We're going to go ahead and go on to a break. This portal will not close. If you are one of the 64 individuals who are still participating in this webinar, there's multiple things that you can do during this break. You can type your name into the questions box to get into the speaking queue, and when we return, we will call upon you. You can type your comment or question into the chat box, and we will speak those out aloud and respond accordingly. And we will be back at 8:30 p.m. It is now 8:11 p.m. Central Standard Time. We will return at 8:30 p.m. This portal will remain open during that break, and we will resume with any speakers that are in the queue at that time, and also resume with going through the chat at that time. We will turn cameras off and return at 8:30 p.m. Portal will remain open. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for participating in tonight's webinar. The Midbarataria Sediment Diversion virtual public meeting tonight marks the third of 3 meetings that have been held. The first was on Tuesday, April 6th at 9 a.m. The second one was on Wednesday, April 7th at 1 p.m. And tonight's meeting began at 6 p.m. all Central Standard Time. At this time, there are no speakers in the speaking queue, but I believe that there are some chats that have been coming in, and I'll turn to Brad Laborde with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to discuss those chats.
All right, we do have a couple more here. One has to do with the sediment diversion being, I guess, a channel builder that, you know, flows and leads to different channels and rivers. Has there been any discussion about building a man-made river? So the man-made river might help with flooding if constructed right. So I would say that the diversion as proposed is a bit of a man-made river that is short in scale or distance, I would say, but it does reconnect the basin, or that's as it's proposed to do. So we do have Chapter 2, the alternative section that describes the feature of the project features in detail, and also we have the impact section in Chapter 4, Section 2 of Geology and Soils for you to take a look at with respect to addressing maybe this comment in more detail. Before our break, I think about the 8 o'clock hour, and being that if the folks that are still on, we got quite a bit of rain last night, and I had company at about 3 a.m. So I don't know, maybe at 8 o'clock I kind of ran out of gas, but I did get tripped up when describing the project and some of the flows. So maybe it would be a good idea. I know maybe we can get some clarification on that. And also we have a comment here about sand particle size, which is important and something that we looked at in detail when we were drafting the EIS. We talk about that quite a bit in Chapter 2, as well as sections 4.2 and 4.4, where we talk about land building from the diversion. That's explained in detail there. But with respect to the flows and maybe some of this sand particle discussion, we can turn it over to the applicant, CPRA, to shed some light on that maybe with the rest of our time today. Brad?
You're on mute, Mr. Barth.
Might be double muted, Brad.
Sorry if I surprised you, Brad. All right, that may have been a bad idea. See, they had bad weather up in Baton Rouge as well last night, so.
Okay. Hey, can you hear me now?
We can.
We sure can.
Proceed.
Sorry about that. The Wi-Fi went out here at the state, so it had to reboot and it just wouldn't reconnect me. But I think some of the question was about the sand and the silt and the clay distribution and the sediment particles related to the river and so forth. And just to give you a little bit of background, we have looked at numerous different invert elevations and such in terms of being deeper or being shallower. And relatively what we see is not necessarily a big difference in the depth of the invert, but by how big the arm of your capture is, or your width of your structure to bring the water from the river into the structure with the sediment. So more of the capture zone. So if you kind of think of a vacuum cleaner catching stuff out of the river, the bigger nozzle you have to catch it with seems to be a little bit more important than what we see on the depth of the invert of pulling stuff from the river. So right, hopefully that helps out a little bit on your comment.
Yeah, and Brad, I got tripped up. Sorry. So I wanted to see if you want to address, I got tripped up on the operations with the flows and the bell chase gauge. So I didn't know if you wanted to take an opportunity to clean up my mess there.
No, I think generally you had it pretty good. So the operational criteria is 450,000 CFS in the river in terms of that capacity to turn on or open up the gates. At that point, approximately, depending on what the head differential is between the river and the basin, it would be approximately about 35,000 CFS at that initial opening. And then as you approach the million CFS, that's when you would reach more of the 75,000 CFS on the max capacity of the diversion design. And again, that's generally in the flood season or the high river season. In the times outside the high river season, when we're below 450,000 CFS, there would be a base flow of up to 5,000 CFS. So hopefully that helps clarify that comment as well.
Appreciate it. Okay, I think that catches us up on the chat. So I don't see anything that needs further addressing on our sheet here. I think we can take a second and see if folks have any additional information. Give folks a minute to provide their chat if needed, and we'll sit tight here. We are here till 9. So
we would just like to remind everyone that it is very simple to get your name onto the speaker's queue. Simply type your name into the questions box. To get into the speaking queue at this time, I'd like to ask Ms. Soto to assist, then Mr. Nguyen and Mr. Tay on those instructions, please.
Comenzaremos la sección de comentarios del público de la reunión. Cuando se registró para el seminario web, le preguntamos si quería hacer un comentario durante la reunión. Durante las siguientes horas continuaremos con el seminario web para comentarios del público. Llamaremos a la persona por su primer nombre y al mismo tiempo el nombre de la siguiente persona en la lista de modo que tenga algo de tiempo para prepararse. Cuando llamemos su nombre, quitaremos el modo mudo de su línea y tendrá 3 minutos para hablar. Gracias.
Thank you. Mr. Nguyen.
Khi bạn đang ký hội thảo trên web, chúng tôi đã hỏi bạn có muốn đưa ra nhận xét trong cuộc họp không? Chúng tôi sẽ tiếp tục chạy hội thảo trên web để lấy ý kiến công chúc trong 2 giờ đến hoặc lâu hơn. Chúng tôi sẽ gọi tên của người đầu tiên và đồng thời tên của người tiếp theo trong hàng để bạn có một chút thời gian chuẩn bị. Khi chúng tôi gọi tên bạn, chúng tôi sẽ bật tiếng đường dây của bạn và bạn sẽ có 3 phút để nói. Tôi sẽ trực tiếp dịch nếu bạn cho ý kiến bằng tiếng Việt. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen. And Mr. Tay.
Thank you. ជំរាបសួរនៅពេលអ្នកចុះឈ្មោះចូលរួមសិក្ខាសាលាតាមអ៊ីនធឺណិតនេះយើងបានសួរថាតើអ្នកចង់ផ្ដល់មតិក្នុងអំឡុងពេលប្រជុំឬអត់ប្រសិនជាអ្នកមិនបានចុះឈ្មោះជាមុនហើយអ្នកចង់បញ្ចេញយោបល់នៅពេលនេះសូមអ្នកសរសេរឈ្មោះអ្នកនៅក្នុងប្រអប់សំណួរយើងនឹងបញ្ចូលឈ្មោះអ្នកទៅក្នុងជួរអ្នករងចាំបញ្ចេញយោបល់ហើយអ្នកនឹងមានរយៈពេល3នាទីសម្រាប់បញ្ចេញយោបល់សូមអរគុណ Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tay. And all of the materials that have been presented at tonight's meeting can be found on the URL that's on this slide. And you can also, we just want to remind you of the many, many ways to make comment on the draft EIS and or the NRDA-RP. You can do that electronically by going to that first URL. You can submit your written comments by U.S. mail at the address for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, New Orleans district there. And those comments just need to be in, all comments, by or before May 4th. And U.S. mail just needs to be postmarked by May 4th. And if you're comfortable speaking your comment after tonight's meeting, you can do so as well until May 4th by calling 866-211-9205, 866-211-9205. And there's about 20 minutes remaining on this third and final public meeting. And we're here until 9 p.m. And again, you only need to submit your comments via one of these methods, and they all carry equal weight. So at this time, we'll just pause and see if there's additional chats that come in or additional individuals who may desire to give verbal comment at this time. And so we'll just take a pause. And if you joined us late in the evening, in addition to the representatives of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and NOAA and CPRA that you see on the screen, there are also other Louisiana Trustee Implementation Group members who are also listening in on tonight's proceedings, including the U.S. Department of the Interior, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. They're also listening and participating in tonight's webinar.
Thank you. And we can circle back to a few more items here. I know we talked about the design life quite a bit, being 50 years, or clarifying the 50 years, that being the review period for the EIS. And I know that if folks are familiar with the QIPRA process, I know that those types of restoration projects typically have a 20-year design life or project review life. The 50 years, one of the civil works guys on our team chimed in and said, hey, 50 years is a standard. So I may have misspoke earlier, but I just wanted to clarify that. We have a question here about sea level rise in the future. We do talk about sea level rise.
I can clarify a little bit on that, at least on the structure side.
Sure,
design life is 50 years and service life is 100 years on the structure. So real similar to what we would see for major infrastructure type projects from other entities, how they would tackle major infrastructure.
Okay. Yeah, and there is a question here about sea level rise, and that is something that we considered throughout the EIS. how we would, or how CPRA might handle sea level rise with operations in the future is certainly something that folks can reference in Appendix R of the EIS. That's CPRA's monitoring and adaptive management plan. That's where that's located. We have another chat here about, oh, it has to do with the three major projects referenced. So perhaps, and most of you are probably tired of hearing from me anyway. So Mel, if you want to chime in here, please do.
Yeah, happy to, Brad. So the question was in reference to the 3 projects that I mentioned earlier that the Louisiana Trustee Implementation Group approved as part of our strategic restoration plan. And those were a large-scale marsh creation project just north of the proposed diversion outfall called the Large-Scale Barataria Marsh Project. The other one's the Spanish Pass Ridge and Marsh Restoration Project. And the third one is a large-scale sediment diversion that we're further evaluating in this plan. The question relates to what are the synergistic benefits, or how do they work together? So the 3 projects provide benefits all on their own. So they could exist without the others and provide benefits, particularly to meet the needs of the Trustee Implementation Group related to restoring for injuries caused by the spill. But because the spill caused injuries at an ecosystem level, it's important for us as a Trustee Implementation Group to provide the full suite of ecosystem benefits in the basin that we can, using a plethora and a number of different approaches to restoration. So by building a marsh platform, we help provide the benefits that habitat project provides. By providing a ridge restoration project, it provides different habitat benefits, particularly some upland benefits and benefits to birds, as well as the adjacent marsh benefits. And then this project, if approved, would provide marsh creation benefits. It would also sustain other nearby wetlands projects, and it provides additional benefits from the connection of the river back to the estuary, particularly related to helping to bolster the base of the food web through the inflow of sediment, nutrients, and fresh water into the basin.
Thanks, Mel. Okay, moving down the list here. When will the structure be operational? What year? Of course, there's a lot of variables at play with that, right? So again, the Corps is still reviewing CPRA's proposed project and evaluating through using the EIS as an evaluation tool to weigh all of the pros and cons of the project. Once the final EIS is ready, the Corps would then do a public interest review, which would be the final review of the Corps that would determine whether or not it's in the public's interest to issue, deny, or proffer another alternative to CPRA with respect to their application. So with that being the case, it's hard to pinpoint the year. But if the Corps did issue a permit for this project, I'm certain that CPRA would act quickly and beginning construction. And that's also, I'm forgetting another component here. There's the restoration plan, the funding aspect with this project as well. So if there's a Corps approval and CPRA has the money to begin work, I'm sure they will do so. At that time, the construction time frame is expected to be between 3 and 5 years. We have a couple of thank yous, so I'll share that with the panel as well. Mel, you got a thank you for your explanation on the 3 projects as well. And I think that gets us up to date on the chat.
Okay, I think we'll just pause here for another second.
Okay. Yeah, and I will say for those that are still participating, we did get some technical questions and responses today. And if you are feeling like we didn't fully address something, or you're, we directed you somewhere and that's not really what you wanted. I mean, with all of these comments, we will take them into consideration. We will go back and look at the draft EIS with reference to your comments and see if there's any updates that need to be done there before we publish the final. And once that final is complete, it'll go out to the public. That'll be the third step of our public involvement. So back in 2017, we had our scoping meetings, and here we are now reconvening with you all here virtually to get comments on the draft EIS and what's currently scheduled for the spring of next year. We hope to have a final for you to once again review and comment on. There's a question here about maintaining and dredging navigation channels. With respect for this one, the Corps is the main or the entity that will maintain federal channels affected by the project. So that would be the Mississippi River, Southwest Pass of the Mississippi River, Barataria Basin Waterway, Bayou Lafourche, GIWW, it's the Gulf Intercoastal Waterway. The channels that are not federal channels will either continue to be maintained by local entities, if that is a thing. It may be maintained by CPRA, but it depends on the channel, more so in the outfall area where there isn't Corps jurisdiction or Corps funding to maintain navigation. We do have information on dredging in Chapter 4, Section 27. So that's 4.27, and that's the summary of mitigation where there might be some more information there. Okay, so we're all caught up here with our 8 minutes remaining.
And the speaker's queue is idle at this time. And we just remind you, there's still individuals who are participating in the webinar. If you wanted to take advantage of this moment to make a verbal comment, please just type your name in the questions box and we will call upon you immediately.
All right, the chat is still quiet on my end. So, Mr. Franklin, if all is clear on your end, we can go ahead and start wrapping up here. We will keep the go-to webinar open until 9 o'clock, but I think we're okay to move forward with some of the closing slides now.
Very well. Seeing that there are no further requests to make public comment at this time, this will conclude the public comment portion of tonight's webinar. As Mr. Laborde mentioned, we will keep the portal open and active, and so if you do chat, send the chat in, we will receive that chat. We want to thank you for your participation. If you find that you have additional comments you would like to make, or you were unable to make a verbal comment tonight, please note that you can do so in a number of ways, including by regular mail, electronically through our online form, or by calling into a dedicated phone line where you can leave a 4-minute message. We appreciate all the input we have received thus far and will continue to receive through May 4th. As a reminder, the feedback you provide will be considered as part of the final EIS and restoration plan that is scheduled to be released in spring of 2022, which will inform the permit decisions that will be made shortly thereafter. Thank you all for attending this webinar. We hope you found this meeting informative. Please have a great rest of your evening. Good night.